the instructor that I sense this, but I have difficulty using this word because of my concern. So that your instructor understands that it is not that you don't feel it, but you have some diversity background that censor your articulation. Another aspect is cognitive diversity. I was so glad that I teach Come to 14 in this program, because before I taught Come to 14 about student development, I taught practically. But when I know about the learning process, I have more appreciation of student struggle with empathy. Reason being that sometimes we say like the counselors are too black and white. You are too black and white. So what we really want is someone who can have relativism, who can take many different feelings into perspective. But you came to our program as a black and white thinker. So should you be kicked out of the program? You see what I mean? Because how do I know until like I do practicum, then I realize that I think black and white. So there's a way of learning how to gradually take others' perspective. There's no black and white, but there is a coexistence of different struggles. Okay? So when you have a more black and white thinking, it's very important for you to know that the whole learning process can be ego-threatening. That means like your own personal thinking style is being challenged, and you are scared, you struggle. This is natural. Talk to your peer, talk to your instructor about that, instead of trying to defend your black and white thinking. But you might have a more dualistic way of thinking, but you're willing to explore other people's thinking, but you need help. Does it make sense? But since this is ego-threatening, your natural tendency is to defend yourself. And the more you defend yourself, the less you could learn a new skill. Another thing is cultural aspect. That some students feel it is rude and judgmental to tell the student what they feel. Some students consider it is rude to interrupt the client, but if you don't interrupt, you will never find a time to talk. And some consider it is impossible to make a statement about the other's experience until you know every details. How are you going to handle this? This is your cultural belief, which should not be denied. But what can you do with this understanding that I have a cultural constraint? But am I willing to test it out in other cultural contexts? Maybe it is culturally incorrect to use it in the Chinese everyday life, but it can be used in a practicum counseling session. Because after all, the client who comes to counseling understands that it is new experience. Does it? You see what I mean? So understanding the cultural aspect doesn't mean that you have to be bounded by the cultural constraints, but you have to dialogue with it and understand how it affected you and how you can unlock it. Affective diversity. Sometimes we as therapists ourselves have different range, intensity, and depth and mode of feeling. And your range, intensity, and depth and mode might be different from that of the clients. That's why it is not matching. You see what I mean? For instance, in my Chinese culture, it's difficult for us to fully express the feeling of anger. It is more culturally acceptable to express sadness, happiness, but not anger. Fear, yes, but not anger. So I might have difficulty with identifying the range of anger in my client. So how could I expand that from vicariously putting myself in the client's position and articulate that range of feeling that best match her feeling, not mine. I would not want to express those feelings, but I need to respect her and be able to articulate her feeling. And by doing that, actually, you are expanding your own range. Then you become a more like dynamic counselor. Then you are only constricted by your own affective emotion, affective experience. But it takes courage to go outside your what you have, and then you grow from there. Learning styles. Some students learn through feeling and thinking. Some people learn through watching and doing. I understand that a lot of instructors will tell you to go outside your brain, right? Like, you know, leave your brain out. You're thinking too much from the brain. You should think from here. But if you are a thinker, your first point of entry is thinking. There's nothing wrong with thinking. The important thing is, how do you nurture that feeling part in you that is less your preference? You cannot say that you cannot feel. Because thinking and feeling, everyone has different preference, but both exist in you. So how can you use yourself the best for the client? If you are a thinker, don't feel bad about that. You will always be a thinker, but you will grow in feeling to help the client. Theoretical orientation. You also come to the counseling session when it focuses on non-directive. But then you live in a culture when that, or your belief is more directive. If you understand, if you have seen Albert Ellis counsel, he would cuss at the client. He would be very abrasive. But you know, he was kicked out of his own foundation at the end of his career. But for a long time, he is a famous master of a theory, right? So there's nothing wrong with being directive. But then you would be saying, like, how come in the counseling program they make us so non-directive? You know why? Is like Carl Rogers the only thing? No. But why do the counseling program make sure that you start with non-directive?
It's easier. I don't know. It's safer.
Safer. Because if you are not like jumping into like explaining the student, right? You let the client take the lead. So you are approximating the client's true feeling. But then if you are directive, you already quickly make a judgment of what they need and then do it. Does it make, yeah, that is, the non-directive is safer. And the affective feeling, so in the counseling program, non-directive, affective. Use immediacy, present. But we do have solution-focused counseling that's more directive. But the foundational work is non-directive. So implication, it's important to have a continuum approach to grow you into articulating the empathy, approximate understanding of the client. You don't have to find the right word the first attempt, but is it closer to understanding? Embrace your experience, because it's a very ego-threatening context. You feel your whole person is under microscope. And it can be so threatening that I have like a student, I talked with the student, she was like doing totally non-effective responses in the session. And so I talked with the student afterwards. And the student disclosed to me that in the counseling session, she kept on thinking, what will Dr. Lam say? And then she's trying to say something that I would approve. But you know how is the oxymoron, the paradox? Is the more you want to do it, the more you sabotage yourself. but the important thing is you let yourself be, and then try to mold yourself into the more effective. You're not trying to be someone else. It's important to have a safe learning environment. So when you support each other in the practicum, it's important for you to empathize with your peer. And also the paradigm shift towards universal access to the optimal learning environment. Universal access meaning that we want students to access optimal learning from different aspects. If you are a dualistic thinker, what do you need to succeed? If you are less connected with your feeling, what do you need to succeed in this class? So we all have different starting point. And then we want to have some kind of measurable outcome at the end. But we have different starting point. But how can we embrace the different starting point towards the goal? And I just want to let you know that growth can be so fast.